Hello, everybody. Welcome to the yes. I see my guest is dancing. I mean, during the countdown, I was thinking about making that countdown longer so I can just listen to the songs. So I think you're okay. I think we're good now. I think we're watching. The guest is watching at the same time the live stream. So hello everybody. Welcome to the DevRel show. This is the third episode. I'm super excited. You know what? I thought about this a while ago. Never really took the time to do the live stream, and now was the time to start it. And you know what? It seems like so far so good. I mean, I got a great feedback from people. I got amazing guests, and I'm fully booked in terms of like guests until April next year. So it's not going to stop after today. We have way more episode coming up. It's just nice, to talk with other people in the industry, especially in my cases. I'm traveling a little less than I used to, going to less conferences, like keeping in touch with people from the industry, talking about DevRel, learning about new stuff. I think it's just amazing. So selfishly, it's awesome for me. Hopefully it is for other people. So again, welcome to episode 3. I'm super excited today. I have someone I do not know. I have David. We never met in person. David G. Simmons, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Who are you? You're on mute right now. You're on mute.
It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this show. So it's I have been doing DevRel for a while. So having this whole DevRel show is kind of cool. I think it's a great thing for DevRel in general and for our community as well.
That's wonderful. And David was one of the first person to fill the form to be on the show. So as you said, I guess you were excited about the idea also. So let me start by saying hi to Harshit Mehta. Sorry if I scrub your name. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk a little bit about David, talk a little bit about like developer relation. We're going to have like the second part of the show is going to be a demo about David's company product. So we're going to learn more about stuff today. So if you have any questions during the show, feel free to add them in the chat, and we're going to try to answer them. So it could be a question for David, could be a question for myself. The more the merrier. Having questions always make the show a little more lively than just having myself asking questions. So on that note, David, you said you've been in DevRel for a while. Tell me a little bit about your career path. So how long have you been in tech? What did you do? And what brought you to DevRel? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't start as a developer advocate like most developer advocates. You had a previous job before. So what's your path? What's your journey?
I did not. I actually started my tech career. Well, first of all, I started it by opening my big mouth because I was talking to a lady who runs an athletic apparel company. She was telling me how she did like all of her planning for the year about what, how much fabric to buy, blah, blah, blah. And she did it with a literal pencil, paper, and adding machine. This was back in like 1990. And I was like, that's what computers are for. Like, and so she's like, okay, well, you write me the program and I'll pay you for it. And I was like, okay, great. How hard can it be? Whenever you say how hard can it be, you should hit yourself in the face very hard.
Exactly. You're looking for trouble.
So a year later, I had written her an ERP system for her business. Having never written a computer program in my life.
That by yourself? Oh, wow.
I used HyperCard on a Mac.
I do not know what HyperCard is.
It was actually a really cool thing. It was like you had cards, like index cards, right? And they could execute. And then they could call another card. And so what you're executing on the card, which is basically a script, could call a different card, which could call a different card, which could call a different card, right? And could display things or run in the background. So that's what I used.
That is pretty cool. That is really, really cool. Say, and what did you do after that? So just to be like, I'm not quite sure. So you were not a software developer. You helped that company. You built something, and after that, you decided like, okay, I think I do not hate that, or I liked it, and I want to do that for my career or for
Yeah, I had a really good time doing it. I learned a lot. It was like solving a puzzle, right? It was exactly like that for me. And it was all about like learning how to make this thing do that. Right. Oh, cool. I want to do that. And so I just kind of kept going. And I was lucky enough to be living in an area and living around people that worked in a very high-tech industry. I grew up in northern New Mexico, and all the people that I was hanging around with worked at Los Alamos National Lab. And so they got me in the door there, first of all, to organize a high performance computing conference. And as part of that, I got to administer a network of about 20 Sun workstations. This was in like 1991. So I was learning Unix, right? I was learning Unix and how to administer those. And that kind of, from there it went to the next thing and the next thing. And I was writing, network intrusion detection software for the laboratory. And then I got hired at Sun Microsystems as a sales engineer. I think we called them, sales engineers, basically. Yep. And after about a year of that, that was just like an easy job. And there was this thing going on in Sun Labs that they called Oak. And so being inside Sun, I got access to it and I started playing with it. And then they released it as something called Java.
Yeah.
And so since I'd been playing with it, I knew some folks in the Java world inside Sun, and they hired 10, what they called North American field technologists for Java.
Okay.
And we were really supposed to cover North America, but really we covered planet Earth because they didn't hire anybody else anywhere else to do this job. Right.
So you're talking about like I see that as like pre-developer relation event, because we always say that like Apple was the one who had like the first like technical evangelist, or it was called technical evangelist, but like from your story, I feel like it was prior to that you started to do a job that like may not had the title, but like looked like developer relation in the end.
This was in like 1996, early 1996, maybe. And so, I would go around and Java was one of the things that like opened the door for sales guys, right? Yeah. So they would want to go into an account. So they would say, hey, I got this guy. He's like, he knows everything about Java. Let's bring him in and talk to you. And so I'd go in and talk to him, and that would get them in the door. But I helped start like Java users groups all over the place. And like, I just talked nothing but Java, just flew all over the place. It was nuts.
That's awesome. Like Java was my first professional programming language. So I learned other languages before, but like my first job, they were looking for a Java developer. It was in 2002 maybe. And so I started, and Java was my mostly only programming language for 5 years. And after that, I moved to another job, and like I had to use other programming languages, but I really had a great time. I seriously have no idea where Java is right now. But like when I was using it, I was just in love with it. I was like a big fan of like oriented object, like programming language was like Java was doing well, and the quote unquote portability with like Java applet in the time where you were able to run things in the browser, which was like amazing compared to what we were able to do that time. Like maybe today's like with HTML and like any other new technology that you have right now, you can replicate a lot of things that we were only able to do with Java at the time. But like that was such an amazing like programming language, and hopefully it still is.
I was just thinking about that this morning. I was in a talk about JavaScript, and I was thinking, when I first started this, we ran Java applets. There was nothing you could run in the browser. So we wrote these little Java applications that would download and run in your browser as applets. And that side of Java is completely gone, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Oh, that's awesome. So that's super interesting talking to you about that and your experience and your journey, because when I talk to people and I say, a lot of people ask me, like, oh, how long have you been doing DevRel? I'm like, for a while. And for me, it's been about a little more than like maybe 11 or 12 years, which is not something that you see often in the industry, because that's an amazing job. But at the same time, it can be really demanding in terms of like schedule, and like especially during the time, like depending on your job, some people travels a lot. I used to travel 80% of my time, which was amazing because I've been through everywhere in the world and basically cost me nothing. I was going for work and I was always able to extend 2-3 more days. But it's really bad for building like a life at home, or where you call home, or like relationships and stuff like that. On top of that, you're always on. You go to conferences, you talk to people. You cannot just like stay in your corner. Your job is to connect and to talk to people.
Right.
So it's quite demanding. So usually, like most professional developer advocate I've seen, they've done that for like 2, 4, 5, 6, and after that, they're like, you know what, love it. I've done it, been there, done that. I need to do something else. But I've been doing this for a while. But like, you are doing this for way longer than me, which is like
And
amazing.
I've sort of gone in and out of DevRel. 1997 and 1998, I think I traveled about 350,000 miles a year for those 2 years, which is just nuts when you think about it, right?
It is crazy.
And then I went sort of, I was doing. Sun had these things they called technology manager. So when a new technology was being developed and rolled out as a product, they had somebody like me who would like talk to all the technical people and sort of run the, be in that Bermuda Triangle between engineering, marketing, and field sales, so that everybody understood what was going on. And I did that a bunch of that. And then I ended up back in a developer role in Sun Labs, like doing actually Java again, but this time it was Java embedded on devices. So we helped develop the very first IoT developer kit. It was based on Java, and it ran Java on the metal.
Nice.
And again, I was like a developer, but then we had to build a community. So, I stood up a PHP BB instance, and then I ran that, and I ended up going and giving talks at conferences and talks at Java 1, and, it ended up being DevRel, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And when we talk about DevRel, I mean, I always say like it's a company job. It's not like just the individual being hired to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, DevRel, from my point of view, DevRel is like is everybody's job to a certain limit, obviously. So like that, you're in a developer role and you have to do those kind of things. I think it's interesting, and like it may change to like a full-time role when like a big chunk of your time now it's more the other stuff than like software development. So no, that's awesome.
I was just talking to some other, we had a little DevRel luncheon at All Things Open today. So a couple of dozen of us all got in a room and had our lunch together and talked. And one of the things that we were talking about was that DevRel is inside the organization. It's all about influence and not authority, because basically DevRel has no authority over anything, right? Mm-hmm. We report to DevRel, but we can't tell engineering or marketing or product management or any of those people what to do, but we have to influence what they do, right? And we have to be sort of the conduit from developers and users to them. But we can't like tell them you can't do that. You have to do this. We have no direct authority, right?
Yeah. That's actually that's right. You know what? I never thought about it. I mean, like, I guess I know what you just said is right, because that's the reality. That is like the reality of DevRel. But I never really stopped and took the time to think about it. What I usually tell people, like I often have discussion with people who want to start in DevRel, and I basically tell them like you're gonna work with everybody. You need to be friends with everybody. You're gonna work with all departments, but on top of that, you're gonna try to help mostly every department in different ways.
Yep.
But you're probably gonna need help with from most departments also. So you like basically need to be friends with everyone. But it's true that like you're an influencer. Internally and externally, and as you said, you cannot force people. So no, make total sense. I like that. I just want to say hi to Mazzy, who just joined us in the show. Hi, thanks for joining. If you have any question for David, please ask away. Can I say that he's a veteran in DevRel? I didn't know. People say it's like there's some kind of like
Well, the
negative
other thing I
connotation.
found,
I don't.
it's not just about influence, it's about like sort of letting people know that about your expertise so that they seek out DevRel for, to ask things. And my favorite example is a company I was working at that the marketing department developed some swag for conferences. And they made a bunch of buttons with a whole bunch of different slogans on them. One of the slogans was unbelievably offensive to women. And the discussion I had with marketing afterwards was, all you had to do was ask us, right? We know what will fly at a conference and what won't, right? But for an entire year at every conference, we would dump all the buttons out on the table and sort them out to get all the offensive ones out and throw them away.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just it was a waste of resources that could have been avoided had we been asked, right? But again, it's how do you let them know that you should be asked, right?
It's not always easy because like I don't know if I should say I started to become a little bit cynical about those things recently. Not recently because it's going super well where I work right now, but like in the last years, because it's always a little bit politics, even if it should not be politics in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I'm offering my help, and I'm always the first to say, like, I don't have the only truth. I'm going to tell you what I think maybe is best or what maybe we can improve. We're going to have a discussion. We may agree, we may change things, we may back up on like our opinions, but like it's a discussion. But one thing I can tell you is that I know my audience. I know developers, and I'm a developer myself. I used to be a developer full-time. I'm a developer advocate now. I still consider myself a developer, even if I don't work on a product full-time and I don't code full-time, I still code. We are a special kind of people. So there is like things that, and not even about like your offensive buttons, which is like totally another different discussion about like women in tech and like how we badly manage that at so many stages, and like how we are so not unwelcoming for women in tech. We're trying to the best as we can for most people, but like there's so many companies or places that they don't understand that. But like going back to the developer side of things, I mean, there's a way to connect with developer. There is a way to approach them. And most of the issues I had in my career was mostly about like working with marketing and sales. And I work with fantastic people, but I also work with department that like, yeah, we know marketing, we know sales, we know how to sell to people. And like, yeah, you're selling to people, but you're also selling to developers. And there's a different approach to that.
Well, there is, because developers don't want to be marketed to or sold to, right? They're like, And so marketing saying, yeah, we don't need your input because we know how to market to people. Well, you do, but do you know how to do that to developers in a way that they will accept and not just say, I'm not taking your marketing bullshit. I don't want to hear it. I'm not doing it. Leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference in how you approach that. And it's in credibility and, knowing your audience, knowing the developers, knowing what they care about, knowing what's important.
Yep.
And not just what the message that we want to get across, but what do they want to hear? What do they need to hear from us? What are they looking for from us? And that's that's kind of the difference, I think, between marketing and DevRel is marketing is here's the message we want to give you. And DevRel is what do you need from us?
Yeah. That's a big difference. And like these other departments like marketing, they can affect my job. I mean, like if you keep like sending those cold emails to developers or you market them in a way that does not resonate with them, that may even affect my relationship with them or what I'm trying to build with like the developers community. So like it's important that we all work together and maybe we can find like an in between where like, hey, it makes sense for me, or it makes sense as much as possible for my audience developer, and it makes sense for you on the marketing point of view to get your like your KPI or to reach your goals. So it's always, I feel like it's a teamwork, but to be able to do that, we need to have a discussion and work together.
Well, and that's again the influence versus authority thing, right? I need to be in a position with the people in marketing that I can influence them, even though I have no authority. And I also need to build my credibility with them so that they will listen, right? Whereas, because I can't tell them what to do. So I have to go and build a relationship with them and let them know that I know what I'm doing and that I can help them, right? And here's how I can help you, so that they will come to me and ask those questions, right? And it's the same thing with, with engineering, right? Letting them know that I can help them and that I can get them the kind of feedback from developers that they want, that they probably can't get because they don't have the kind of connection to the developer community.
Yeah,
right? Again, it's influence rather than authority.
Yeah, and you touched a really good point. It's I'll always say, so like what's in for them. So what's in for the marketing? Like, how can I help you being successful? And by doing that, hopefully that's going to also be an exchange of goods, and like you also going to be able to help me. So can we find a way to help each other and work together? So that's super important. I've seen some people that got burned because they ask, and they always ask, and they ask, and they ask, and yes, part of our job, we need a lot of inputs. We need a lot of things from other people in the company. But like, if we're always asking and trying to get things from people, it's not working. You need to be a bi-directional relationship. So what's in for those people? What can you do to help them? So I think it's not just good for DevRel. I think it's good for anything professionally, and probably even on the personal side of life. Really trying to approach those kind of discussion with people about like what can you do, what's in for them, what can you do to help them being successful. And I think over the past couple of years, I've been way more successful in building the relationship when I approach those about like, hey, let me try to help you also, and not just like, hey, you need to help me because my job is important and I'm the one connecting with developers. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Well, in large part, DevRel is dependent on all the other parts of the company, but in order to sort of have any kind of be useful at all, we also need them to be dependent on us, right? And so it's, how do you build that relationship of, I know I'm completely dependent on marketing for all of the marketing materials and for a budget for swag and all this kind of stuff, but how do I also make them dependent on me for messaging for developers and the developer specific stuff that they want to do, right? So that it is a more equal relationship, and it's not just me asking for stuff all the time, because they'll get sick of me asking for stuff. And the other thing that they will finally do is the company will start to look around and say, wait, we are shoveling all this money down this giant hole called DevRel, so that David can fly around the country and post selfies on Twitter and go to conferences and talk to people and go to fancy dinners. What are we getting from it, right? And so it's really important to make sure that the what are we getting from it comes first, right? Here's what you're getting, right? Here's what I can do for you. Here's how I can help. Here's how I can provide you these resources, right? And in order to do that, I need to go do these things. And I know it looks all glamorous, and it's just absolutely not. Those of us in DevRel, now people say, oh, you get to travel for a living. I'm like, no, it's a have to. It's not a get to, right? And there's a difference.
That is so true. That is so true. Actually, when I started to do that job, for me, that was like the biggest perk. I was like, oh, I'm traveling, because I didn't travel before. But there's a difference traveling for work and traveling for pleasure. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do. I love my job. So for me, the line between like, hey, I'm a DevRel, I'm getting paid to do that, it's a job, but at the same time, I'm having fun, was really a little bit fuzzy. But like, when you travel a lot more, when you travel often, it's starting to really be a job. And don't get me wrong, again, super happy because I've been to many places around the world. I've met great friends at conferences. I had a great time. I visited new cities, new country. That was amazing. But at the same time, that was really taxing on other parts of my life. So there's pros and cons to the job. But so far, yeah. So speaking of that, and before Mazzy was saying he started with Visual Basic and then C#. I can't remember the last time I did some Visual Basic, but I remember C# was my second professional job as a software developer. Right after I was doing Java, I moved to C#, and that was great because Java and C# at that time, I don't know where they are right now. Those are two languages that I didn't use since forever, but they were kind of like quote unquote on par in terms of like features. So the switch was like just to learn the new syntax that makes it a little bit easy for me to switch to C#. But yeah,
well, see,
those
and
were.
I was at Sun when the whole Sun versus Microsoft war was raging, which is where C# came from, because they didn't want to pay the licensing fee to Sun for Java.
Are you
So
serious?
so they made basically a language that was Java, but not quite. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I used to. I worked at Microsoft during the evil time of Microsoft, like trying to do goods within Microsoft. So I'm not surprised because it was even prior to my time at Microsoft, and yeah, that was a different era. I'm really, whether people agree or disagree, I'm really happy where Microsoft is right now since Satya is the CEO, because he's as passionate about the company, and it's not perfect. It's a big boat you have to move. It's a mindset you have to change, and it's a big for-profit company at the end. But I think they're making like big stride in the right direction to be more open, play a little well with other, which like they were not really good at, which just what you just said right now, which I'm not even surprised. I'm like, I didn't know, and I'm not even surprised.
Right, and I will say as well that Microsoft is a completely different company now in how they approach the outside community and other software frameworks. It's a whole different thing, and it's really nice to see.
It is. It is. So, we're talking about our experience about developer relation. From your point of view, like, has a developer advocate, as someone doing DevRel, what's the great things about that job, and what's the not so glamorous thing? We touched base a little bit on those, but like, if you want to elaborate, or like if you have any other thoughts you want to share about that.
Well, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that a lot of folks in DevRel also suffer from ADHD, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an accident. Yeah, same. Hi. I don't think that's an accident. I think that DevRel sort of feeds our ADHD in that we hop from thing to thing, right? I'll be writing a blog post, and then I can't think about what I want to write next. So I start writing some code, and then my code's not working. I get mad. So I go and like start submitting some CFPs and working on a talk. And it's all these different things. So we're not doing the same thing every day, which we can't do very well, right? It's just not in our nature. And so I think it's why we find so many like us in DevRel. I think it's not an accident, but it's also it's a great thing in that it sort of feeds a whole bunch of different sides of me, right? Sometimes I like to be very social, so I get to go to a conference and I get to talk to people, but after a few hours of that, I'm all done, right? And so I can go and like hide in my hotel room and write some code and write a blog post or do something, right? And I can sort of take care of all those different sides of me that work. For a lot of people, DevRel doesn't work because they don't want to be around people, right?
Yeah.
Or there's a whole bunch of reasons why DevRel may not be for you. The downside is you end up having to spend a lot of your career justifying your existence, because you end up in that spot where, why are we shoveling all this money down this giant hole labeled DevRel? What's in it? What are we getting from this? And so you have to constantly be justifying your existence. And it can be a very volatile career, as we've just seen in the last year, where DevRel organizations are being decimated.
Yeah.
because, well, we have to tighten the belt. And DevRel spends,
The first one to go.
Right, because you have to understand, DevRel is a cost center, right? It is not, you're not going to look at DevRel and say, well, they're making us this much money. It is something that a company spends money on. And the returns come in all sorts of different sort of sideways, not always directly trackable ways.
It's important. It's so important to say that, because when you started and you say like, hey, it's a cost center, I know what you meant, but I was afraid that like maybe people do not understand and you just jump it right at after. I mean, like, we bring value to the business, but the value we bring is harder to put in like an Excel spreadsheet when you say like, hey, I talked to 10 people, I got like 5 new customers that paid that amount of money. Like, it's not like sales, it's not like things are like, there is way to track the impact you have. But on top of that, DevRel for me always have been a medium to long term type of impact that you have with DevRel, because it's about the human. It's not about bullshitting people. It's not about forcing people. It's really about connecting with people, helping them being successful. And you hope they're going to be successful with your product or service. But in the end, you're there to help them. And like, you're there to connect with the human, and honest connection with people may take time. And I have my best example about that was exactly when I was working at Microsoft. I remember, he's a friend now, but someone who joined one of the hackathon that I was organizing in a conference, and it was about like using Microsoft. It was Windows Azure at the time, Microsoft Azure, and the guy came to the hackathon, and it was like, I'm using AWS. I'm not going to use Azure. But like, I'm having an issue. I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'm gonna help you. Like, if I can help you, I mean, like, I don't know AWS like as I would like with Azure, and I was able to help that person, and that person was like, okay, like this guy works for Microsoft, and he took the time to help me during his Azure hackathon about something on AWS, and I was like, you know what, like, if I can help you, I'm gonna help you, which I did. So the guy came back to another hackathon I've done at another conference at some point, and this time it was about Windows 8. We just launched Windows 8, and it was about using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build application for DOS, because that was the first, probably the most open thing that Microsoft had, quote unquote, open, that Microsoft has been done for a while. And it decided to come to that event because I was nice with him at the previous one, and I helped him, and it was like, okay, maybe Microsoft is not that evil, or at least not everybody at Microsoft, or not all Microsoft. And after that, you know what? This guy became one of the most prolific Windows. Actually, decided to move to Windows Phone at the time, and one of the most prolific Windows Phone and Windows 8 developers, was living by making money out of those applications put in the marketplace. And I'm not saying like he is successful because he is a good developer, but he stuck to the ecosystem because of that, and he became that developer something about like 3 to 5 years after the first hackathon. So I left Microsoft at the time, and he started to use the product, but he said, so it's not me invented that. He said like it was because of me. So it's hard to measure that for a company when they say like, you know what, I talked to that guy today, and you're going to see the return on investment in 3 to 5 years. Which like company do not like. It's right now. It's by the end of the fiscal year. It's this quarter, even this quarter. So DevRel, sometimes it takes time, but like if you approach people with compassion, if you're there really to help them as much as you can, whatever is possible, I think.
You may be talking to somebody at a conference about, and they may ask you like where you work and what you do, and you tell them, I work at Otterize and I do this and this, and this is what we do, and they're like, yeah, that's not useful to me, but 3 months later,
exactly,
somebody they're talking to at a conference says, yeah, we're trying to do this thing, and I just have no idea. And they're like, I talked to this guy, and he was doing this for this company. It's called, Otterize. You might check him out. There's no way to track that, right?
Yep.
But that person then comes to our website, starts using our stuff, and we have a new customer. And that's directly attributable to DevRel, but it's not directly traceable. So it's hard to, this is why the topic of metrics in DevRel is always raging and is always an absolute clown show, because everybody is trying to measure things that are at times impossible to measure.
Mhm.
And the other problem is that when, people being people will optimize for what you measure, right? If you tell DevRel you have to write blog posts, they'll crank out blog posts, right? And then you go and look at it, then you go and look at the actual stats of the blog
Yeah.
post, and literally nobody's reading it. So you're putting in a lot of effort and you're getting no impact from it, right? Because all you're measuring is the number of blog posts. Great, how is that helping the company? And that's what I go back to, the constantly, having to justify your existence is by finding ways to constantly say, this is how we're impacting the company, right? This is what we're doing. This is how we're impacting developers. This is how this is how much traffic we're driving to the website. This is how many eyeballs we're getting on our blog posts on dev.to or Medium or dzone or wherever, right? And sometimes writing blog posts for the company blog is the wrong thing to do, because nobody knows that the company blog exists, right? But if I write for dzone, I'm going to get 100,000 hits or 10,000 hits or whatever. Then they'll know that we exist, right? And I've been in exactly that situation where we were told, no, all blog posts have to be posted on the company blog. And posts on our company blog got like 50 hits. And I started posting those instead to dzone, and I was literally getting 10,000 hits. And it's like, your requirement is actively reducing the impact of DevRel.
Yeah. That's the other thing too. Also, that there's, I was laughing because I had that discussion about like videos versus blog posts and like different medium and where we're having an impact right now recently. So that makes me laugh. I won't go in details in that, but it's also the justifying part, and a little bit related to what you said, is that there's also a miscomprehension of like what is DevRel, or a different expectation about what should be DevRel versus what the people you hire to do developer relation think it is, which is usually a general understanding about what it should be. And that happened to me in the past when like you go in the interview and you discuss with the hiring manager and the leadership team, and you seem that you have an understanding and like what is DevRel from their point of view, what is from your point of view. Sometimes it's aligned, sometimes you can like meet again in the middle, and you start a job and they're like, but like you're not like sales or you're not like marketing. And I'm like, but we had that discussion when I was in the interview process. And at that point, it's like it's the end of your journey, because like they were expecting you to like be a salesperson with a cool title, or be a marketing or traditional marketing person with like a more like developer centric title, which like yes but no. It's, I mean, like we do a little bit of everything, but we are not that. Like,
they think that DevRel is like a money tree, that if you shake it hard enough, that money's going to fall out of it. And it's really, no, it's not a money tree. It's a money hole. You pour money into it. And you have to just believe that and understand that it's this long-term play. And it's about building brand, building community, building loyalty in the developer communities, building brand affinity, and really getting sort of bringing people in the door, right? I've used this analogy a bunch, but I kind of see, DevRel as three parts, right? There's developer advocacy, there's developer experience, and then there's community, right? And developer advocacy, we're the ones out there, getting, inviting people to the party, right? We're having this great party. Come on to our party, right? If there's no community, we tell them where the party is and they show up and there's like, where's the party? You told us there was this great party. There's nothing here, right? And so community has to build that part of it, right? And then there's developer experience. You've invited them to this great party. Now there has to be things for them to do there. And if the developer experience is terrible, they're going to show up at your great party and it's going to be like, this place, there's nothing to do, and the stuff there is to do doesn't work. I'm out of here. And getting those people back is almost impossible.
Yeah, you
right?
have one chance. You usually have one chance.
You have, yeah,
And the thing is that like there is rarely a product right there that is like so new and so different that there is no other alternative out there. Maybe it's not a 100% one-to-one alternative, but like there is someone somewhere building the same product as you or close enough that like the person that comes to your project, your product, your service, or your tool don't have a great experience. They're just going to move and go elsewhere. So you need to care about all those steps in the process and like really give a great experience to users. And this is where DevRel is interesting too, because yes, we bring people to the party, but we're going to help you to make it a nice party. We're going to help you to be sure that like they're going to have a right experience. We're going to be sure that their feedback is going to come back to the right person. We're
right.
going to bring the feedback to the right people. We're like developer advocate. We advocate for developer.
Yes.
So it's our job to help the engineering team or the product manager or like the people making the decision to understand either if they're going the right direction, to confirm some roadmaps, to know that like, hey, that feature that we had in mind or that issue that we decided to prioritize is the right one or not. Like, hey, there is that thing that keeps coming back when I talk to people. Like, yeah, we didn't thought it was a priority, but maybe we should like put it on top of the list.
I did this interesting experiment at a previous job where we were like, there's this one part of our product that like engineering thinks that people really like. And we in developer relations, we're pretty sure that people hate it. And because of not because of what it did, but the way that it worked and how hard it was to use. So I ran this thing. I wrote this little program that would go and pull out we had an instance of discourse. And so it searched all of discourse and pulled out any post that mentioned this part of our product. And then it took that entire post and ran it through some AI sentiment analysis, right? And sentiment analysis runs from +1, which is absolutely positive, to -1, hated it, right? And so I ran all these posts through this and then averaged out the results. And this technology came in at a -0.8.
Wow.
Which is terrible. But then I was able to go to engineering and say, I got some bad news for you guys. I don't really want to burst your bubble, but here's what I did. And here's where it ended up. And they were like, oh my God, that's terrible. And they were able to then have some empirical data to say, let's spend some cycles improving this. And they did. Now, the thing to do would have been to go back later and rerun that same thing on the discourse instance from the date of the new improvement to the present and see what the sentiment was. But I didn't end up being there long enough to do that. But again, that's the kind of being able to provide that kind of value to engineering of, you guys think people really like this, because a lot of people use it, but they absolutely hate using it.
Yeah, because there's a big difference between they use it and they are having a good time. Like they use it because they have to, or because that's a feature that they need. But like if they don't get a great experience, like yes, maybe they will still continue to use it because they don't have the choice to, but it may not be the case also. So that's also a great like way of bringing that data to basically like prove your point, because depending on the team you work with, I know like right now where I am at Cube, I just go talk to the engineering team and I say like, hey, that feature is not good. I'm sometimes a little bit too bold, but we have that kind of relationship. Like they're honest with me, we're honest with each other, and they're like, okay, Fred, like we believe you, they trust me. So I'm in that kind of relationship where my life is so much easier right now because they listen to me, I listen to them. When they tell me like, Fred, we don't have time to prioritize that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to communicate that to the user in a proper way. So we have that kind of relationship. But I've been in places where you don't have that relationship with the engineering team. You always kind of like in a battle between like, hey, this is what I hear, this is what you do, and it doesn't work together. So having that kind of data where you really can be like, no, it's just like, it's not just me thinking that something is happening. Like I can prove it to you because I have the data. I have like every discussion that we have like on the Discord. So that's a pretty good way to not to prove your point in the sense that like, hey, I put it in your note, like I was right. More like, hey, I want to be helpful, and like I can prove it to you that that should be helpful to you to spend time on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So you said the word authorize a couple of times. So I'm curious, what is the company? What's your role as the your head of developer relation?
Yes.
So what do you do? What's the head of developer relation?
Well, depends on the size of the organization, right? In larger organizations, the head of DevRel like manages the entire DevRel team of developer advocates and developer experience engineers and documentation folks and all that, right? We're very small. There's 15 of us, and so I manage that team, and that team is me.
Sometimes it's the hardest part, managing yourself.
It is. So, I am recently actually in charge of our documentation and tutorials and sample code, and I speak at conferences about Otterize. I write blog posts. I work with the rest of the company about sort of what we're doing and what our strategy is, and how we should approach our developers, how we should approach community, how we should approach open source, because we're an open source company, all those sorts of things.
That's awesome. So would you like to show us a little bit about the product?
I would actually. We have very little time, but I will do what I can in the time that we have. So I'm going to share my screen.
And yeah, sometimes the discussion just go naturally.
Yeah, and that's great.
And that's perfect. That's the goal of that podcast.
I'm going to share my entire screen. So the first thing we're going to get is infinite recursion.
Inception.
But I'm going to switch Windows, and that will stop. All right. So this is Otterize. And here's a really funny. So we have this cute little otter logo, right?
It is.
And it's an Israeli company. And the reason it's named Otterize is because if you talk to an Israeli and they start to talk to you about authorization, authorize sounds like Otterize when an Israeli says it, which I just think is an awesome sort of origin story for the name, right?
That is good. I mean, like I understood by the name and by the little I known about the project that like you had some word plays here, but like I didn't know where it was coming from. So that's awesome. I like that.
What we really do is this intent-based access control, right? You declare your intent in your Kubernetes service. So I intend that this service is going to talk to that service, right? And that intent is then turned into a network policy.
Okay.
So I can basically start moving towards zero trust because I can implement MTLS. I can implement, all these security features by declaring the intent along with the code, right?
That is absolutely new to me. I mean, I've never used IBAC or intent-based access control whatsoever. And you said it's open source on top of that.
Yep.
So
I have this cluster called DevRel running in GKE. And I am going to really quickly, hopefully, deploy, let's see. Get my commands ready here because I'm just going to copy and paste.
And during that time, let me thank our sponsor, which is my employer, kubefirst.io. What we do is related to Kubernetes, so that's a good guest to have today. We are offering you a tool to create production-ready cluster with all the cloud-native tools, open source tool that you need that we think you need to be productive, and you can do that in minutes. So you can try it for free on kubefirst.io. It's also open source on GitHub. And, it can save you a lot of times because creating a cluster is easy. It's everything else that comes after that takes time and can be quite consuming. So thanks for them for allowing me to spend some time and do that DevRel show basically during my work time. So thanks for sponsoring it that way, the DevRel show. Super happy to do that it's nice to work with people that are excited about your idea and care as much as you do about, education and just like developer relation.
So the first thing I'm going to do in this demo is I'm going to create a namespace for our demo application. And then I'm going to deploy it. And it's kind of like a sort of a mocked up e-commerce application, right? And so it's going to create a whole bunch of services, including Kafka and a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Okay.
So here's my cluster, and here's all the stuff that's running. And we get down here, and here's my demo starting up, and you can see all the services are starting up, right? But the thing about this is it's really impossible to see sort of what's talking to what in here. So I am going to go over here, which is our cloud application, and I'm going to create a cluster, and we'll call it DevRel. And here's what I need to do in order to sort of add Otterize to it. So I'm going to add Otterize, but I have to add, I actually want to add a couple of other things because I want to be able to keep track of Kafka.
You're going to have to change your API client ID and secrets because now everybody can.
Yeah, that's okay. I delete the cluster as soon as it's gone, as soon as we're done here. Great. So now if we go back here, we can go look at what's called the access graph. And you can see that the network mapper that I just deployed is connected. The intents operator is connected, but the credentials operator hasn't come up yet. And if we go back here and run you can see that I now have the Otterize ecom demo, and I have these Otterize system parts that are just coming up as well, right? Network mapper is up, right? And the intents operator is up. We saw that over here in the graph. And the Istio watcher, the Kafka. So now everything should be up.
And for folks,
window,
if you don't know Canine it's one of the best tools. I feel like if you like the terminal and you want something that makes it a little bit easier than like using kubectl all the time on the command line to like see like your namespace, your node, and everything, it's a pretty nice tool.
Oh, look, there's my cluster.
That was fast.
And here's what everything is talking to. I can see what service is talking to what service, right? And I can see that the front end is not protected. And if I were to implement network policies, then the load generator would not be able to talk to the front end. So let's fix that.
I like the diagram and really seeing like how, because like even when I was praising K9 as a tool, it's still like text based, and it's like you still don't see things connected together, talking together.
So here's what I mean by intent based, right? This is my client intent. Okay. The load generator intends to call the front end. That's it. I'm just saying this is what I intend to happen. So I can run that same command and send it directly to kube control. And let's watch this. There we go. I have declared that intent. And so this is unprotected, but if it were protected, it would be allowed, because I've declared the intent. So the network policy has been created. It's just not being enforced. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Here's my simple file for protecting that front end service, right? It's a protected service and it's called front end. And what we'll see is this will create, so the network policy has already been created. And shortly we will see that this is now, it will be enforced on the front end. There it is. So no other service, I couldn't put another service in here that
can you
call
zoom
the front
just a little
end.
bit?
What's that?
Can you zoom just a little bit? So, okay, yeah. Now we're not seeing the protected. That's
Right.
great.
Protected. So if somebody decided to put a rogue service in here to call the front end, they couldn't do it without updating the network policy. Because they wouldn't have a declared intent, which was turned into a network policy, and this server is protected, so it will only accept input right now from load generator or for from a client that has a declared intent, a declared network policy, right?
Okay, so it generate that for you. So it's why because I was curious about like the difference of like doing your network policies like yourself and like using a intent based policy tool like yours. But I think you answered my question.
But so here and what it's doing is it's discovered that this is a discovered intent, but nothing's declared, right? And so nothing's declared. If I were to protect ad service, this would turn red and I would be blocked and I would not be able to call it because I did not declare that. Now let's go down here and see. No, Kafka doesn't seem to have come up yet. So I can actually create a giant network policy by doing, let's see. We're not going to do front end. Let's change this to ad service. And you'll see that it creates a bunch of them this time because front end is going to call ad service, but it's also going to call all these other ones. So it's going to create the network policies for all of them. So if I just send that to kube control, what we should see here in just a couple seconds, all of those turn green.
Nice. Okay.
So now I can go and add protection to ad service, cart service, currency service, right? All of these services, I could add protection to them. And what I'm sort of doing here is I'm walking across my cluster and implementing zero trust. But zero trust kind of goes both ways, right? You, as a new person showing up at Otterize, have zero trust in us. So we're going to let you do this one step at a time to sort of see what's going to happen. Yeah, I protected this service and nothing broke. Cool, right? Let's try protecting this one.
Yeah, makes sense.
What breaks, right?
I like that. I like that. And you were having those end-to-end with the CLI. Like if I am a GitOps shop and I like to have things like in my Git repository, it feels like it was YAML, kind of like the policy we're creating was YAML. So could I just like had the YAML file?
So exactly what you would do is like a developer who is developing the front end service knows what services they need to call, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they list those in a YAML file, and this is exactly that. It's just YAML. It's a YAML file, and they put that with their code in GitHub. And as part of the PR process, you can now add the security team with a platform engineering team who goes and looks and says, he's intending to call these services. Do we want to authorize that? Right? Do we think that's okay? And if it is, then they can then sort of, approve the PR as part of the approval process. And then when it gets pushed to production, this gets pushed with it, and those network policies get created and enforced.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. I like that. So I was thinking it's sort of hard for me to get out of like my work focus sometimes, and I was thinking about our product, which is around like creating Kubernetes cluster. As I was saying before, we basically create a cluster with the tools you think you need to be successful. Like we pre-install and configure and make things work together with Argo CD, Terraform, Atlantis, Shakur Vault, and cert managers, and a lot of tools that we think it's an opinionated platform that we think you need to have like a functional production ready cluster. And we try to keep this to a minimum because after that, like every needs change from one person to one company to one team. But we have what we call a GitOps catalog, where we had applications that are basically like just YAML file that like helps Argo CD to deploy the application. So what we could do is we could add Otterize to the GitOps catalog. So having the YAML file that do the equivalent of the Elm install that you've done, and because I can describe or write my intents in a YAML file, it makes it perfect for a GitOps scenario, which we promote with our project. So I like that.
And when you're deploying the service through a GitHub, pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline, you're going to basically call some, Kubernetes commands to deploy that service.
Mm-hmm.
And then all you have to do is add the kube control apply with the YAML file, and as part of that deployment, and you're done, right?
Awesome. I like that. You know what? I like it as a user when I see someone demoing their product and it's like, oh my God, that's so easy. But I know as a developer how complex it can be behind the hood. But like what you're trying to achieve with that product is like a little bit what we do. You tackle the complexity for your users. So when your users go to use your project, they can do something that could be a little more annoying sometimes to do, like managing all those policy, but like in an easy way, because your project is like the in-between that make it easier to do.
Look, I don't know much about Kubernetes. I will admit that up front. And I know nothing about implementing Kubernetes network policies. Literally nothing. So I could not do this network policy stuff myself by hand with kube control or whatever, right? And that's the thing. I shouldn't have to, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to. I should be able to say, I intend to call these services and I want them authorized, please. Okay, they're authorized. Security and the platform engineering team went into GitHub and they saw my code and they saw my intents and they said, yeah, that tracks, that's okay, we can allow that. And they approved the pull request. And the next thing I know, my service is deployed and it's protected. And I can end up with a zero trust cluster. I can implement MTLS and I can implement, this network policies, and I can have a zero trust cluster, and I don't have to know all the gory details of how it got there.
That's awesome. I know some people disagree, but like when I talk about Kubernetes, I always say Kubernetes is difficult because but like it's not made to be easy. It's made to help you scale. It made to help you like be more successful with your cloud endeavor. But it means that there is a lot of moving pieces. So adding tools like yours to make it easier for people, especially on the security side, because I remember I worked for not too long for a security startup, and like the question I was asking developers is security important for you? And 100% of developer were answering yes. And when I asked them, so what are you doing when it comes to securing your platform or your application? And most of the developers were like, myself included, were like, well, we put SSL certificate, and yeah, that was kind of it. And now we have tools that make it a little bit easier from the time I was asking those questions, but still it's often an afterthought. So having a tool like yours that make it easy and part of like the lifecycle development process, where like, yeah, it's just another YAML file that doesn't seem complicated at all to write. And just by doing that, I will ensure that I will have like a secure cluster. Damn, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Good product.
I hate to do this to you, Fred, because I'm having a fantastic time, but I actually have a hard stop and I have to go to a.
No, it's good. It's good. Actually, I feel like not more than an hour in a live stream. Even an hour is long, but like when the discussion is going well, it's nice. Anyway, we were at the end. So thanks a lot for the demo. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom about developer relation. That was nice to have you. Folks, you were a little bit quiet on the question side today. It's fine. If you have follow-up question, let us know. And I'm going to try to answer them in the comment, or I'm going to share them with David. So thanks again, David, for joining the show. Absolutely. That was a pleasure having you. Hopefully, we're going to be able to meet maybe at KubeCon. I don't know if you're going.
Yep, I'll be at KubeCon.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to be there too. See you there. And
yeah, if anybody else can be at KubeCon, come see us. We'll have a booth. Otterize will be there. We have stickers. We have little plushy otters. We're actually a really great bunch of people. So come see us.
And I saw the preview for the stickers that you share on the DevRel Slack. Yeah. So folks, you won them. You won them. So
all right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks again, David. And everybody, see you in 2 weeks for the next podcast. I'm going to have Mason Hager, with whom I used to work at DigitalOcean. And it's probably going to be another great episode. So see you, everyone.